Hello everyone, welcome to the Dill Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and welcome to the wrap-up video of my 2011 retrospective. About a month or two ago, I started this retrospective on my Letterboxd, reviewing movies from 10 years ago to see how they hold up a whole decade later. And a lot of the movies that I had seen 10 years ago got even better, some got worse, but then I discovered a lot of new films from 2011, and it was a lot of fun breaking all those films down on my Letterboxd, doing a few videos for the channel. If you haven't seen them, go check them out. I did a video on Bridesmaids, a video on Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, a video on Pirates of the Caribbean, on Stranger Tides, and then a Picture This video where I broke down all the Best Picture nominees of 2011. But here I am to give you my top 10 because there are so many movies in 2011 that are worth talking about. So without further ado, let's jump right into the top 10 movies of 2011. Before I get to my number 10, I'm going to give a few honorable mentions, starting with some of the tentpole blockbusters. Obviously, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, such a great franchise starter. This was a movie that I didn't think was going to be good, and it surprised the hell out of me. It really rejuvenated a franchise that was getting tired. Andy Serkis's performance in particular is incredible. You also have Captain America: The First Avenger, a really solid Phase 1 Marvel film. Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol, a Brad Bird film. One of the most suspenseful sequences of all time in any action film, where Tom Cruise is climbing the giant building in Dubai. It is an incredible sequence, but a really great movie. Another action film I really liked from 2011 was The Raid. It's a movie I didn't get around to till now. Really loved the style of action, how fast the pace of the film was. 2011 was a great year for animation. While Pixar gave us a dud with Cars 2, I think other studios came to play. Disney itself put out Winnie the Pooh, which is very good. We got a great Christmas film with Arthur Christmas. Rango came out. DreamWorks gave us Kung Fu Panda 2. My personal favorite animated film from 2011 was The Adventures of Tintin, a really great mocap animation film directed by Steven Spielberg. Really just captured the sense of adventure that you see in movies like Indiana Jones, but with the medium of animation, he was able to go the extra mile with all the action and the intense chase sequences and all the spectacle and flair, so I really love that film. Steven Spielberg gave us another great film with War Horse that year. That was a 2-for-1 for Spielberg. Scorsese was at the top of his game with Hugo, a really great family film about the origins of film and the love of filmmaking itself. Bridesmaids is a hilarious comedy. As I said, I did a video. You can check that out in the top right corner if you want to see that. Other comedies I really like: Friends with Benefits, 50-50, a movie I didn't love when I first saw it because I didn't think blending a movie about cancer with comedy would really work, but as I've gotten older, I really do appreciate this film a lot now, and I really like it, especially Joseph Gordon-Levitt's performance. Being Elmo, a really good documentary about the man behind the puppet. A film I'm sure a lot of people will be surprised isn't in my top 10, but only because 2011 is stacked, is Drive, a really stylistically perfect film, just visually, with a really great performance by Ryan Gosling. It just edged out of the top 10 only because there are other movies I probably rewatch more than Drive, but I really love Drive. Also, Lynn Ramsey's We Need to Talk About Kevin, a really chilling and frightening drama by Lynn Ramsey, who I also loved from You Were Never Really Here. A really great film showcasing one of the best performances of the year with Tilda Swinton and Ezra Miller, who is incredible in the role of Kevin as well. But now it's time to get into my top 10. These are going to be non-spoiler talks for each of these films, so please feel free to watch this whole video. There will not be any spoilers. Starting off with number 10 is a director that everyone knows, everyone loves. I finally got around to this film for the first time. It is David Fincher's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The film is an English language adaptation of a Swedish novel by Stieg Larsson. It follows a journalist played by Daniel Craig as he investigates the disappearance of a patriarch's niece from about 40 years ago, and he is paired with this pierced, tattooed punk computer hacker named Lisbeth Salander, played by Rooney Mara. And
sometimes he pleasures her. Not often enough, in my opinion.
the two of them have just such a great chemistry in this film. I love watching the two of them together. The strength of the film really comes from David Fincher's style, because he always brings such a great style to these crime movies. The pacing and the editing, which is incredibly good for a 2.5-hour film. It feels like an hour-and-a-half long movie, but you still want more and more and more. It moves that fast and it moves that well. But the real core is that relationship between Rooney Mara and Daniel Craig. Each of them on their own are so unique, but together they have some of the best scenes in any 2011 movie. Just the two of them talking, having intimate conversations.
Can I call you Elizabeth? I want you to help me catch a killer of women.
But also when they're on the move, when they're going through these clues and trying to figure out the mystery. It keeps you guessing all the way to the end. It's not higher on my list only because I just watched it for the first time, but I do think it's a very strong showing from David Fincher. If you're a fan of his films, I think you'll really, really like this one. Coming in at number 9 is a film that won the Oscar for Best International Film in 2011. It is a film called A Separation by Asghar Farhadi. It is about a married couple who is faced with a very difficult decision to improve the life of their child. One of the family members wants to move to another country, but the other parent wants to stay behind and care for his father who has Alzheimer's. It's not the easiest watch because it is so drama-filled. It is a very heavy watch.
منم که شدی اینجا پیشنهاد بده آقای قاضی چیکار کنم
ایشون بهونه کرد
من بهونه نکردم شما گفتی یه دلیل بیار من
But I really, really love how this film is written. When you read the biography, you think the movie's going to be one thing, but then there are twists and turns along the way that make it about something else, and I really appreciated it, that every few minutes there would be another piece of information revealed that would recontextualize pretty much the whole film, make you see other characters' points of view, root for other characters, rather than the other sides of the characters that you rooted for earlier in the film. I think it really shows that you can still have big stakes with a small-scale film. This is a simple Iranian drama, yet because the characters are written so well, the relationships are written so well, and because we can really, really hone into each person and really understand and empathize with each individual person involved, I think the stakes are almost more effective than that of a giant blockbuster tentpole suspense film. I think it's really, really impactful. Roger Ebert, who was such a huge inspiration to me, it was his number 1 film of 2011, so I had to check it out, and I was a big fan of it. The director actually has a new film coming out this year called A Hero. I am already looking at it as a potential winner for Best International Feature just by the word of mouth alone and by the marketing and the director behind it, because if he could make another movie as good as A Separation, we might be looking at another Oscar winner this year. At number 8, I have Take Shelter by Jeff Nichols. This is a film about a man who starts to have these apocalyptic visions. He almost has nightmares in the middle of his sleep.
I've been having these dreams. They always start with a kind of storm.
And it's about himself and other people questioning whether or not what he is imagining in his head is really coming to fruition, or if it's something else, maybe related to something in his family, in his genetics, and his heritage. This is a very, very powerful film. It has one of the best performances by Michael Shannon. Michael Shannon really brings his all to this role. It's a really good commentary on mental health as well, because it deals with the idea of having something in your mind that is making you think different thoughts and seeing how other people judge you. I think a lesser director would have ended this film much differently, but because Jeff Nichols has such a great understanding of humanity and what it means to be a family and really stick by the people you love, even when other people in society are trying to tear them down, I think it's a really, really beautiful statement. And I think Take Shelter is one of those really unique films that takes a very clever premise and then makes it a even more compelling character study through that premise. And I think it is one of Michael Shannon's best performances. It's one of Jessica Chastain's best performances. It is a film you cannot miss. At number 7, I have The Muppets, the Disney film by James Bobin. When Disney bought the rights to The Muppets, you know, everyone was like, yay, that's great, Disney's making Muppet movies. But then when everyone saw this movie, everyone realized how much of a hoot it was.
I don't care what anybody says. I believe in you. And you.
Jason Segel is great in the lead role, as well as Amy Adams. It's fun to see all these celebrities really commit to this material, because the material, while it is geared towards kids and families, it does have some adult humor. It has some nice little innuendos here and there. I mean, the dry, sarcastic wit that we love about the Muppets, it's all present there.
It's an electric fence.
Yep.
I think it has some really nice themes about trying to balance the person you were and the person you want to be, and trying to mend those to create the person you can be in the present. I mean, there's this great song, Man or Muppet. It won an Oscar, and I think this really reflects the theme of the film, especially for Jason Segel's character. I think if you're a fan of these characters, you really love the nostalgic moments of this film. But even if you aren't as familiar with the Muppets, because when I saw this, I don't think I was a super Muppet fan. You know, I didn't see the Muppet movie, I didn't see Muppet Christmas Carol, all the other classic Muppet movies, but I still felt so connected because all of the actors seem so connected to the work, and they seem to really want to be there. And I think for kids movies, sometimes you have actors who are just doing it for the paycheck, but these actors really felt like they were committed into giving the best performances possible and having the most fun on set. This is the most fun watch of any film in 2011.
Check it out. Fart shoes.
It's one of my favorite movie musicals of the past few years. The songs are so good. Life's a Happy Song. Someone beside you to share the load. Pictures in My Head.
Now they're only pictures in my head.
Man or Muppet.
I'm a man.
It is so good. I could just listen to the soundtrack on its own and be happy. It's that good. The Muppets is a big recommendation from me and my number 7 film of the year. Coming up just outside the top 5 at number 6 is The Tree of Life by Terrence Malick. This is an impressionistic story of a Texas family in the 1950s. It follows the life of the son Jack as he goes through his childhood with his relationship with his father and mother, and then when he is older in the modern world. And this is a very ambiguous film. I think first and foremost, the craft is exceptional. I think the cinematography is beautiful, the sound design, the score, everything that Terrence Malick brings to this film directorially is one of the best things I've seen in any year ever. Rewatching it, I grow a greater appreciation for it every time, but I think it's something that is going to be very hit or miss with audiences, but I think that's what's so great about Malick, is that he is someone who you will either be a amazing fan of, or someone you will find his movies to be pretentious and boring and hard to sit through, and I think that's really great that we have provocateurs like Terrence Malick out there making films that just make you think, and whether or not you really connect to the story or like the story, I happen to really like the story. I really connect with the character of Jack and his relationships with his parents and his siblings and him growing up with adolescence and through this Texas town in the 1950s. But even if you can't connect to the material, I think you could still get a lot from it visually, and you could still understand the themes that Terrence Malick is trying to convey. There's a whole sequence where he is basically recreating the origin of Earth and evolution and his take on what that looked like, supposedly, and it's just stunning. This is probably the most stunning film on the list. It's not in the top 5 only because it is long and it is hard to rewatch. You know, I can't just sit down and watch it every single week like I can some of these films like The Muppets. But I think just visually and craft-wise, it is one of the most impressive things that 2011 had to offer. At number 5, we have Moneyball, directed by Bennett Miller, who also directed Foxcatcher, another great sports story. This tells the story of Oakland Athletics general manager Billy Beane, his successful attempt to put together this baseball team, who is the underdog baseball team. They are losing consistently. Billy Beane is asked to really try to scrounge up a team that can get this franchise back on track, because the Oakland A's had a very low budget compared to some other baseball teams.
I believe there's a championship team that we could afford because everyone else undervalues them, like an island of misfit toys.
As a huge baseball fan, I really like this movie, just seeing the ins and outs of the actual mechanics behind the business of baseball. I really like that. But I think there's a lot more to offer than just the simple facts and the screenplay and all the intellectual stuff. I think it's a really stunning character piece because it dives into Billy Beane's past. I think Brad Pitt plays the performance so well. He really connects to this character and the demons that still haunt him, even though he loves this sport so much, seeing how much he sacrificed for this sport and how much he was not able to gain from the sport, even though he had thought he would be a successful baseball player. I think it's a very beautiful story.
Do you think you'll lose your job?
What? Where did you hear that?
Well, I go on the internet sometimes.
Don't go on the internet.
I think visually it's very interesting. The way it's edited is so well done. It reminds you not just how involved sports are in general, but also what it means to be a sports fan and what the game means to you. And I think that is what Moneyball does so well. It's a great balance of both, showing you the business and the love for sports. And I think Bennett Miller is a great director. I recommend Foxcatcher if you haven't seen it as well. He takes a sports story and really spins it and puts his own twist on it, and I really enjoy it. At number 4, we have another sports film, Warrior by Gavin O'Connor. Warrior is about a young son played by Tom Hardy who comes home to his alcoholic father played by Nick Nolte, and he returns home where he's trained by his father to compete in a mixed martial arts tournament. Meanwhile, you have another boxer played by Joel Edgerton who is trying to raise money for his family, who is in debt, and who also enters this mixed martial arts tournament. There are definitely some spoilers that I think you can get if you read a basic synopsis, but I want to keep some of those spoilers out of it because I didn't know anything about this movie going in except for the fact that it was a fighting film, and I think it made it that much more impactful to me not knowing anything about it. There are twists about the relationships between all these different characters that is revealed about halfway through that took me by surprise and really engaged me even more so with the material. I think Gavin O'Connor is one of the best sports directors now working today. He directed Miracle, the great Kurt Russell hockey film. He also directed The Way Back, which is a Ben Affleck drama where he coaches a basketball team. I think Gavin O'Connor really understands that to have a good sports movie, you need to prioritize the drama and the relationships first and the sports second. And while there's a lot of great sports sequences, the sports sequences are immaculate. They're so well crafted, so well directed, but I think Gavin O'Connor understands that the most important thing is understanding who these human beings are first and foremost. And I think that's what makes any good successful sports film, and that's what makes Warrior a very successful sports film. I think Nick Nolte's character, his performance is one of the best performances of the year. He's probably one of my top 5 performances of that year. He just brings so much to that role as this father figure who is not as embraced by his son as he wants to be, who wants to go through change to help his son, to be a better father for his son, to be more involved in his life. And I think it is one of the most just beautifully portrayed stories I've seen in the sports genre. It's a sleeper pick for one of my favorite sports films of all time. It joins the likes of Rocky, Creed, Moneyball, like I just mentioned, and Sugar as some of the best sports movies of all time, in my opinion. I really loved Warrior. At number 3 is Steve McQueen's Shame. Steve McQueen is one of my favorite directors who directed 12 Years a Slave, Widows, the Small Axe anthology. The story is about Brandon, a 30-something-year-old man played by Michael Fassbender, living in New York, who eludes intimacy with women, but feeds his deepest desires with a compulsive addiction to sex. It also dives into his relationship with his sister, who comes to stay with him, played by Carey Mulligan. First and foremost, you hear the description, it does sound like a very provocative film, and to many it will be, because it is a very graphic film. It deals with sex addiction, so it's not a very family-friendly subject matter, but I think Steve McQueen understands, kind of like what I said with Gavin O'Connor and Warrior, he understands to put the character first, and then the actual actions of his addiction second. It is not a movie about sex, it is a movie about addiction first and foremost, and I think that's important to get out of the way, is that this is a movie primarily about addiction and what it means to be an addict and what it means to interact with other people around you and how you navigate the world as an addict. And I think it's one of the most stunning films of any year of cinema, but especially 2011. It is a hard watch at times, but it is such a deeply powerful watch. I mean, Carey Mulligan's performance in a supporting role is some of the best acting I've seen her do. Michael Fassbender is an incredible actor. He's done so many good things, including 12 Years a Slave, another Steve McQueen film, but I think this is hands down his best performance. I mean, he brings so much to this character as well. It's a movie that I think in the wrong hands might make people a little uncomfortable because it is about sex. It's about a sex addiction, but I think because Steve McQueen is such a thoughtful, empathetic director, I never felt uncomfortable. I never felt cringy, watching these very graphic scenes, like these very provocative scenes. I think because the character, he brings so much to the painful past of Brandon's life and his fragile mind, it just makes for such a brilliant character study, and I think this is definitely Steve McQueen's crowning achievement. At number 2, I have The Descendants by Alexander Payne. It tells the story of Matt King, played by George Clooney, whose wife is on life support after a boating accident, who is a Hawaiian land baron who is simultaneously trying to take care of his daughters in the wake of his wife's accident, but also deal with these land dealings with all his family members and trying to figure out what to do with this large chunk of land. What I like so much about The Descendants is the use of tone that Alexander Payne conveys. I think there's just such a beautiful juxtaposition of this beautiful Hawaii with its lavish colors, that sense of family and ohana, and then you have George Clooney's character and what he's dealing with in his life being so heavy and hell on earth, really seeing how these two total opposite factors, this total dichotomy really comes together and creates such a unique blend of tone. There are characters that we don't always agree with, but we can still empathize with and understand because Alexander Payne brings such a humanity to the characters. I think George Clooney's performance is probably the best of his career. I mean, I've seen so many performances, it's hard to pinpoint just one, but I really think this is his crowning achievement.
Look, whatever you two fought about, you have to drop it. Grow up.
You really don't have a clue, do you?
Shailene Woodley, this is the film that really put her on the map in a cinema landscape. I know she had done TV before this, but this was really her breakout role in cinema.
I've been doing really well, actually. Nobody ever seems to notice that.
And then you have people like Matthew Lillard popping up, someone from my childhood, from Scooby-Doo and Scream, delivering a really great performance as well. These are characters who are deeply flawed. What's going on in their lives is incredibly tragic, but the way Alexander Payne kind of connects everyone's stories and makes you really understand what they're going through, while also embracing Hawaii and the beauty of the Hawaiian culture, but also not sugarcoating anything. It's a really, really difficult tightrope to walk that Alexander Payne does super successfully. I think it's my favorite screenplay of the last few years. I really, really enjoy The Descendants, and while it is a heartbreaking watch, it is also a heartwarming watch. And coming in at number 1, it should be no surprise to anyone who watched my video on it, it is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, directed by David Yates. I don't need to tell you what this movie's about because you've probably seen it, but it is the epic conclusion to this amazing franchise, Harry Potter, and it really is an epic conclusion. The scope of the film is so large. I mean, the imagination has not stopped for 1 minute. The sets are spectacular, the visual effects, the sound, the performances are just so dedicated. Even 8 films later, people like Daniel Radcliffe, people like Maggie Smith, people who have been in this franchise the entire way through, still giving top-notch performances, if not better performances than they've ever given before.
Tell them how it happened that night. How you looked him in the eye. A man who trusted you and killed him.
And I think David Yates' direction really elevates all the material of the book to another degree, because he understands how to interweave all these different plot lines, how to give a really definitive conclusion to every single character. I think every single character has a really good bout of closure at the end of this film, and I think that's what makes it so special. The film is an ensemble film. It's not just about Harry, but you get great moments for people like Neville, people like Ron and Hermione. Even Voldemort gets a great arc in this film, but the best arc comes from Professor Snape, and Alan Rickman gives my favorite performance of the entire year. He's only on screen for a few minutes, but with those few minutes, he is able to become the heart, the soul, and the treasure of this film, all in one simple little sequence, and it really is one of the most moving montages I've ever seen on cinema, and it is one of the most breathtaking performances of his.
You've kept him alive so they can die at the proper moment.
I wish this movie was more of an awards player. I get because it is part of a bigger franchise and it's, part 2 of a bigger book. I get why it wasn't up for some of the big major awards like Best Picture, Directing, Acting, all that stuff. But I really do think it's a technical achievement to the highest degree. I think the score is beautiful. I just think it's a really, really great way to honor the book and really adapt the book or the second half of the book to create something special, but also concluding this film series in a very satisfying way. The final moments of this film just make me cry every time because it is just such a burst of nostalgia, but a well-earned one. It's not just nostalgia for the sake of being nostalgia. It's an actual earned nostalgic tear fest when I watch this movie. It makes me emotional, but it's a movie that I go back to time and time again. For only being the second half of a book, it's amazing how the whole film just feels like in and of itself one complete film, and I think that's something that the Twilight films suffer from, something that the Hunger Games films suffer from when you split it up into 2 parts. I think this film does it very successfully, and it is my favorite movie of 2011.
Let's finish this the way we started. Together!
So that's my top 10 of 2011. Thank you so much for watching. What are your favorite movies of 2011? And if you want to read reviews for all these films, along with more films that I did, I even have film reviews for Green Lantern out there, Puss in Boots, if you're into that, Happy Feet 2, movies that would never come close to my top 10, but I still saw in preparation for this retrospective, and I still reviewed. So if you want to check those out, go to my Letterboxd, Dylan_Randazzo. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.